All right, Shabbos, good morning. Let us begin. Thank our sponsors, our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Adar, Paul and Kathy Pollack, for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in memory of Paul's grandparents, Dina Bas Pesach and Zechariah ben Zechariah. We thank our Daf Yomi sponsors, Maishin Chavi Abramson, for dedicating the parak of Arvei Pesachim in the Schus of Refuah Shlema for Daniel Meir ben Chana, and to thank our Daf Yomi sponsors for today, Bob and Lynn Deshevsky, wishing their daughter Lila Baron, Lila Esther Bas Batya, a speedy recovery and a long life. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the neshamas will have an aliyah, and Lila Esther Bas Basya together with Kol Cholei Yisrael will have a complete and enduring refuah. But say with that, let us begin. So another incredible daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Kuf Aleph 101, and we are picking up on the bottom of Kuf Amud Beis 100b. 3 lines up from the bottom. Osam b'nei Adam shekiddshu b'beis hakneses. So what's a lot to do today? So when you make kiddush in shul, literally translated, those individuals who make kiddush in shul. And I will say, what the Gemara is describing is exactly the scene that unfolds in many shuls throughout the world on Friday night, which is kiddush is made at the end of davening. So what's the status or what's the impact of that kiddush? So here we have a tremendous machlokis Rav and Shmuel. So Rashi says over here, and Rashi says, the Rashbam says, "Shekiddshu b'beis hakneses, hu kiddush shemekadish shliach tzibur b'leilei Shabbosos yamim tov b'beis hakneses." This is the kiddush that the Chazan makes at the end of davening on Shabbos and Yom Tiv. So what is the impact of that kiddush? Rav Amar yedei yayin lo yotzi yedei kiddush yotzi. So also let's work backwards. Rav says, you're yotzei kiddush. Yotzei Kiddush. When you listen to that Kiddush inside of Shul, you're actually Yotzei Kiddush, but you're not Yotzei the bracha of wine. Now, what does that mean practically? Take a look at the Rashbam again. Yedei Kiddush Yatza, Afa Pi Shaloshasu. Now, both say, according to Rav, there's 2 Chidushim. Number 1, you didn't drink of the wine. You being able to say, again, we'll call Ruvain's the Shliach Tzibur, Ruvain's the Chazan. At the end of davening, Ruvain's making Kiddush in Shul. So Rav says, I have fulfilled my obligation of Kiddush. So when I go home, I don't have to make Kiddush again. I've heard Kiddush, I'm Yotzei. There's a couple of interesting facets about this. Number 1, even though I didn't drink. So Rav says, first of all, that, and everybody agrees, halacha l'mais, in order to be Yotzei Kiddush, you don't have to drink from the wine. Drinking from the mevarech, the person making the bracha, or someone else who's participating in the Kiddush, someone has to drink. But not everyone has to drink. This is very important. We know this halacha l'maisa. So you want to share the wine after you make Kiddush on Shabbos, that's fine. But and again, it's good. It's definitely preferable. But one is not obligated to do so. As long as the mavarich, as long as the person making the bracha, or for that matter, even if it's not the mavarich, but one of the people being yotzi with Kiddush drinks of the wine, that is satisfactory from a halachic perspective. So Rav says you're yotzei kiddush in shul, even though you're not drinking of it, but that's not the kiddush. But we'll say what's the real kiddush? Rav doesn't require kiddush b'makom suda. This is going to be our topic that we're going to get into now. So remember again, there's a concept ultimately again of does kiddush have to be where you're having your meal or not? Which I will say is really part of a much more yesodistic machlokes as to what is the identity of kiddush. Is Kiddush a stand-alone mitzvah on Shabbos, or is Kiddush a part of the mitzvah of Su'udos Shabbos? And this goes back to what we spoke about yesterday. We'll say, why do you have to eat Poris Mapo Makadesh when you go ahead, ultimately again, and are eating Friday going into Shabbos? Why do you have to eat Poris Mapo Makadesh? Remember again, what's the logic behind that? Why? To separate, but remember, more importantly, what are you doing? You want to show that why are you having this meal? Because of Shabbos. How do you show that you're having a meal because of Shabbos? But only by first having Kiddush there. Remember, that's why ideally there's no food on the table. I make Kiddush, then the food is brought out. That shows that the meal is coming. So that according to that approach, there's concept Kiddush Makom Suda. That Kiddush shows that the meal is a Shabbos meal. So Rav doesn't hold the Kiddush Makom Suda. Rav says, there's just the mitzvah of Kiddush. You can make Kiddush wherever you want and then have your Suda. Therefore, Rav says, when you hear Kiddush in Shul, you're Yotzei Kiddush, but interestingly enough, Yedei Yayin Lo Yatzu. Now, what does that mean? Look at the Rashbam. Yedei Yayin Lo Yatzu. She Yesh Lahem Beveisam Lishtos Chayavin Levari Per Pri Agafen. And the Rashbam goes on, he says, Me'achar She'akru Mimkoman Tavale Hesach Hadas. So we'll say, Rav says, however, if you hear Kiddush in Shul, you're Yotzei Kiddush. So when you go home, you don't have to make Kiddush again. However, if you want to drink more wine when you get home, you do have to make another bracha. Why? Because since you switched locations, switching locations for bracha purposes is what's called hesech hadas, a lapse of awareness. And in brachos, whenever you have a lapse of awareness, that generates an obligation for another bracha. So we'll say, so this is the position of Rav. Shmuel comes along, Shmuel on top of Kuf Aleph, Af Yidei Kiddush Lo Yatzu. Shmuel says, no, not true. Even Kiddush, you're not Yotzei. So Shmuel says, not only, so Shmuel says, you're not Yotzei Kiddush, because remember again, why not? Because according to Shmuel, you require what? Kiddush b'makom suda, and therefore again, when I'm listening to Kiddush in shul, I'm not having my suda in shul. So therefore, halacha l'maisa, I'm not yotzei Kiddush, and I'm not yotzei yayin. That if I want to drink more wine when I get home, of course I have to make another bracha. So says the Gemara el Rav, lama li Kiddush b'beisei. So we'll say according to Rav, who holds, we'll say fundamental machlokes between Rav and Shmuel. What do you accomplish with Kiddush in shul? According to Rav, you're Yotzei Kiddush. You don't have to make Kiddush when you go back home. But if you want to drink more wine when you get home, you have to do so. Why? Both say very important. Rav holds, Ein Kiddush b'makom suda. You don't need Kiddush where you eat. Therefore, Yotzei Kiddush in shul. However, Rav holds, Hesech hadas by brachas. When you have a change in geography, that by definition goes ahead, or change in location. That by definition creates a lapse of awareness. Lapse of awareness requires another bracha. Shmuel holds Kiddush and shul pretty much does nothing for you. So when you get home, you have to make Kiddush again, and of course you have to make another bracha if you want to drink more wine. El Rav, so according to Rav, if you're Yotzei Kiddush at home, if you're Yotzei Kiddush in shul, why do you have to make Kiddush when you get home again? Oh, kadei lahotzi banav b'nei beiso. Both say it's very simple. In order to be motzi my family, because I was in shul, but bepashtos my family wasn't in shul. So therefore, I go ahead and I make kiddush when I get home to be motzi. You're supposed to remember again. The interesting part by kiddush is that halacha l'maisa, you can make kiddush as many times as you want over the course of Shabbos to be motzi people. There are some people that are very machmir on this and make kiddush as many times as they can over the course of Shabbos. So we'll say so again. So therefore, according to Rav, even though I, who davened in shul, am yotzei kiddush, when I get home, my family has not heard Kiddush, so I make Kiddush again to be motzi them. So according to Shmuel, why do I make Kiddush in shul? So according to Shmuel, Kiddush in shul, what does it do for me? It doesn't really do anything for me. I'm not Yotzei Kiddush, right? And I'm also certainly, when I go home, I have to make, when I was supposed to, I remember again, once I'm not Yotzei Kiddush, so it's obvious then that I'm not Yotzei Yidei Yayin, right? Of course, when I go home, I have to make another bracha on wine. So according to Shmuel, what does Kiddush and Shul accomplish? This is fascinating. La Fuke Orchim Yidei Chovasan Da'achlu V'Shasa V'Gana Bekinishta. To go ahead and take care of the visitors who are staying in the shul, who eat and drink and sleep in the shul. And I both say what the Gemara is describing over here is shuls used to have like a hachnasas archim area, hachnasas archim room. So people, visitors who didn't know anyone in town would stay in the shul. Tosas points out, doesn't literally mean in the shul, because there's a halacha of not really having like a meal, and certainly not sleeping in a shul. So it means in like a room, in a room, in a guest room, as part of the shul. So according to Shul, I both said the reason we make Kiddush on Shabbos in shul is because of people who were staying in the shul. It doesn't really do anything for those of us who are going home, because when you go home, you're going to have to go ahead and make Kiddush again. But halacha l'maisa, it goes ahead and it helps the guests. So we'll say, let's talk about this for just a moment. Well, let's talk about this just a moment. So we'll say, so we know already how we paskin with this. We paskin about yesh kiddush b'makom suda, right? We paskin that halacha l'maisa, you have to make kiddush where you are eating. That's how we paskin. So which then leads to a fundamental question as to why we go ahead and make kiddush in shul. So the Gemara says, according to Shmuel the holds that yesh kiddush b'makom suda, we make kiddush in shul for the guests. And in fact, Rabbi said, listen to this. The Shulchan Aruch in Siman Reish Samech Tes, this is incredibly important, writes, Noagim l'kadish beis haknesses, we make kiddush today in shul. Ve'ein lemekadish lito meyayin ela mat'imo lekatan. So we'll say we make kiddush in shul today, right? I shouldn't say, the truth is we actually here don't make kiddush in shul on Shabbos night. But I will say, but many shuls do make kiddush on Friday night in shul. So what do? So remember again, if the chazan makes kiddush, what's the problem now? The chazan can't drink it. Why can't the chazan drink it? Because it's in kiddush on Gusula. We're going to get into this right now. Ein Kiddush Makom Suda also means if you know that you're not having Su'uda somewhere, you can't make Kiddush. In other words, we're going to get into this. Now, remember, Suda doesn't have to mean where you wash. But what it means is you just can't stand make Kiddush if you can't fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush from Makom Suda. So therefore, again, if the Chazan is making Kiddush in Shul, what is he supposed to do? He can't drink it because that's not Makom Suda for him. So what do we do? Elamatimo lekatan. You give the wine or the grape juice to a katan. Then Kiddush ela Makom Suda. Umeikara lo niskan ela b'shvil archim da'achli v'shasi beknishta lo tziam yidei chavasim. And the Shulchan Aruch mamish adapts the position of Shmuel. The only reason we made Kiddush in Shul, the reason why this concept came about, was because of guests who used to stay in the Shul. V'achshav afagav delo achli archim bekenishta lo batla hatakana zeh. Right, lo batla hatakana. And even though now today it's rare to find guests who stay in the Shul, lo batla hatakana. This is very interesting. The takana of Kiddush in Shul kind of has remained. So Rav Yosef says, you know what he equates making Kiddush in Shul to? You know what he equates it to? It's fascinating. He says, it's like Aleinu. That's what he says. It's his Lashon. What does it mean it's like Aleinu? In other words, that essentially what's kind of ended up happening is Kiddush in Shul on Friday night has kind of become like a chelik of tefillah. It's like a chelik of tefillah. It's not real Kiddush. We know it's not real Kiddush. It can't be real Kiddush because Kiddush b'makom Suda, right? So we'll go ahead, the adult will make Kiddush, give it to a katan to drink, and it's kind of just part of davening. Zeh tam makomo shenago l'kaddish v'eis hakneses, aval yoser tov lahanhig shalo l'kaddish v'eis hakneses, b'chein minag Eretz Yisrael. So I just want to point out, the Mechaber himself says that halacha l'maisa, the minhag is not to make Kiddush in Shul anymore. That is the Mechaber. And he says that is the minhag of Eretz Yisrael. Now the Ramah says, Haga v'nagu la'amod b'shashem ekachem beis hakneses. So the Ramah seems to indicate that the minhag is to go ahead and still make Kiddush in Shul on Shabbos. But he says the minhag is, by the way, I want to be clear. We're not talking about Shabbos day, where you make Kiddush in Shul because there's a Kiddush in Shul. That's Kiddush Makom Suda. We're talking Friday night. Friday night where you're making Kiddush at the end of davening, then everybody's going home. So again, the Iker Takana was according to Shul because of guests in the Shul. The Mechaber says, we don't do this anymore. Rav Yosef, interestingly enough, says those who do it continue to do it because it just morphed into chelik of tefillah. And the Ramah says, the Ramah seems to indicate that the minhag is still, in fact, to go ahead and make Kiddush on Friday night. Just as an aside, interestingly enough, the Mishnah Berurah says, so what happens if your minhag is to make Kiddush and there's no katan in Shul? There's no katan in Shul. So I tell you something amazing, if you think about this, you'll think to yourself, how can you ever have a situation where there's not a katan in Shul? So the truth is, it could be in an older community, but if you think about it, it's fascinating that we went through a tekufa. We went through a time period where there were no children in Shul. And I marvel at this now, especially Purim. It was so great. And now you see more children back in Shul. That noise which, we took for granted all these years. So the Mishnah Berurah says, so what happens if there's no katan in Shul? So this is fascinating. If there's no katan in Shul, assuming that the minhag in the Shul is to still make Kiddush, an adult should make Kiddush, and he should drink an extra revius of wine. So I will say, we'll go again, I don't know how much we'll get into this, but we'll see that there are different definitions of Suda. Some people have a liquid Suda. There are many people who have a liquid Sudos, especially in Shabbos during the Haftorah. And so we'll say, so a liquid Suda is constituted by a revius of wine. So if you drink an extra, this is actually very important because even if you're making Kiddush somewhere, and let's say there's no mazonos, so you need to have Kiddush Makom Suda. How do you have Kiddush Makom Suda? An extra revius of wine. One extra revius of wine represents Su'uda. So the Mishnah Berurah therefore says, if the minhag in your shul is to go ahead and make Kiddush Friday night, and there is no katan, there's only an adult who's making, that's it, the Shliach Tzibur is making Kiddush, he should dafka drink an additional revius of wine. That way for him is Kiddush Makom Suda. Good. So we'll say, let's go back there. Says, there's a lot more to say about this, but we're already not going to finish the daf, so we'll focus back here. So it says the Gemara. So we'll say back to the Gemara. So Shmuel goes according to his reasoning. Damar Shmuel, ain't Kiddush al Makom Suda. So we'll say, because remember again, Shmuel holds this halacha l'mai. So you need Kiddush where you eat. Therefore, Kiddush in shul on Friday night, you shouldn't do it, because it's not a Makom Suda. So now watch this. So we'll say, now the Gemara is going to say, by the way, what does that mean, Kiddush b'makom su'uda? What does that mean? Savar minei, hani milimi ba'is l'bayis. So we'll say, I would assume that what Shmuel means is like this. You can't make Kiddush in one house and go ahead and eat in a different house. We have a dramatic change of location. However, but however, again, maybe. So what about, let's say, going from the one floor to another floor in the same home? So b'pashtos, I would assume that's called makom musuda. So what's right? I want to go ahead and make kiddush on my rooftop terrace, and then go ahead and eat in my dining room. B'pashtos, I would think that Shmuel would hold that that's okay. Why? Because all of that is unfolding where? Within the confines of the same home. However, the Gemara says, Amrlu Ravana bar Tachlifa, no. Zimnin sagiyin, hava ka'imna kamei de Shmuel. There are many times that I was with Shmuel on Shabbos. V'nochis me'igra la'ara, and he would go literally again, me'igra la'ara means from an upper story to a lower story within the same house, and V'hader Mekadesh. And Shmuel would make Kiddush again. So we'll say, so you see that according to Shmuel, even movement within the same home could trigger the obligation for another Kiddush. Now we'll say, now obviously again, movement within one room is not going to be significant. But it's possible, again, we'll further develop it, it's possible according to Shmuel, that to go from one story to another story, one floor to another floor, from a roof to a basement, or any type of dramatic movement like that could trigger the requirement for another Kiddush in order for that Kiddush to be b'makom suda. Va'af Rav Huna savar ein Kiddush al makom suda. So we'll say Rav Huna also subscribes to this concept of ein Kiddush al makom suda, that you have to have Kiddush where you're having your meal. Let's listen to this. To Rav Huna Kaddish, because one time Rav Huna made Kiddush, v'is akir le shraga, and his candle went out. Right, he made Kiddush in his home, and halach l'maisa, his candle went out, and now it was dark in the house. And what happened? So we'll say he didn't want to eat his meal in the dark. So what did he do? V'ayul le lemanei lebe ginane de Rabba berei. So apparently, again, Rav Huna's son Rabba had just recently gotten married, and maybe it was even Shabbos Brachos. And what happened? So Rav Huna, the father, took all of his food and showed up at his son's house. Right? To have a shraga, where there was light. So Rav Huna took all of his food, went over to his son Rabba's house, where there was light. V'kadish v'ta'im midi. And what happened? Rav Huna made Kiddush again. So what do you see from there? So remember again, what was the sequence of events? Rav Huna made Kiddush at home. Before he had a chance to eat his Suda, what happened? The candle went out. He gathered up all of his food. He went to the home of Rabba, his son, and what did he do? He made Kiddush again. What do you see from there? Alma kasavar ein Kiddush ela b'makom Suda. So you see clearly from there that Rav Huna holds you need Kiddush where you're going to have your meal. Therefore, because again, Rav Huna never got to eat his meal. And I want to be clear. Remember, if you have multiple meals, no one is suggesting that you require multiple kiddushim, right? Remember again, once you fulfill your obligation of kiddush, you're done. So in other words, so again, this is actually an interesting topic that comes up, because let's say I have kiddush in shul, but then I go home and have a suda. So let's assume right now that I could be yotzei kiddush and akum suda, not even, right, just with mizonos. So I'm in shul, I go ahead and I make kiddush, and either I have, another revius of wine, or I have a couple of cookies. Do I have to go home and make kiddush again? Shabbos says, so the answer is, technically speaking, no. There is an opinion of the Gra who holds that Kiddush b'makom su'uda really means hamotzi. That you fulfill the obligation where you are going to go ahead and watch. Shabbos say, so people conduct themselves different ways in this situation. There are some people that once they yotzei Kiddush with mizonos, do not go back home. When they go back home, they don't go ahead and make Kiddush again. But those who are careful for the opinion of the Gra will make Kiddush again where they are going to wash. So I'm just pointing out over here, the case here, that's why the case here is very specific. Rav Huna didn't eat anything. That's why it's a very specific case. He made Kiddush, never got to eat before the candle went out, took his stuff to his kid's house, shows up at Rabba's house, makes Kiddush again, and now eats. Va'af Rabba savar in Kiddush al makom suda. I'll say even Rabba, the son of Rav Huna, also agrees that Ein Kiddush al Makom Suda. Where do we see that from? I'll say very interesting. The Amar Abaye, Ki Avina Beimar, supposed to listen to this. Abaye says, when we were in the house of Rabbah, Ki Avina Beimar, when we were in the house of Rabbah, so what would happen? Ki Havim Makadesh, when Rabbah would make Kiddush. So Abaye is describing that the Talmidim were at the house of their Rebbe. They were at the house of Rabbah. Rabbah would make Kiddush, and he would say to us, Amarlan, Ta'imu Midi, eat something now at my house. So Rabbah would make Kiddush for the Talmidim, and he would encourage them to eat something right then and there. Why? Dilma, because maybe by the time you get back to your lodging, it's just Talmidim. By the time you get back to where you're staying, maybe the candle is going to go out. You're not going to have any light. And you won't end up making Kiddush or having a Suda. In other words, maybe by the time you get back to your lodging, the light is going to be out, candle is going to go out. You're not going to want to eat in the dark. You're not going to end up making Kiddush or eating anything. So the Gemara says, and you will have not been Yotzei with the Kiddush over here that I just made. Why? The in Kiddush ala makom suda, because there is no Kiddush makom suda. Therefore, Rabbah would encourage the Talmidim when he would make, so the Talmidim were at his home. When Rabbah would make Kiddush, Rabbah would encourage the Talmidim, eat something right now. This is your Yotzei Kiddush makom suda. So, I just point out to you, Tosas brings down over here, and this is Tosas Divrei Maschal b'Kiddusha da'achal nafkiso. Tosas says, it sounds like Rabbah is saying that if the Talmidim get back to their home and the candle's out, that they're just going to go to sleep. They're not going to eat a Suda. But how can you not eat a Suda? You need 3 Sudos on Shabbos. To which Tosas says something amazing. It's true you need 3 Sudos on Shabbos, but no one says the first one has to be Friday night. In other words, technically speaking, if you want to eat 3 Sudos on Shabbos day, you absolutely have the ability to do so. Now remember, that being said, you need Kiddush Friday night. Right? Kiddush you must have Friday. This is very important, right? Because also this could come up, let's say Shabbos starts late. I think we switched the clocks in a couple of weeks. The person says, you know what? I'm going to eat an early dinner and I'm not going to eat anything Friday night. You can't do that. You can't do that because you must have Kiddush Friday night. Now, you could eat a light meal Friday night if you want, or you could just have maybe even an additional revius of wine. But Lamaisa, there must be some semblance of Su'udah in order to be Yotzei Kiddush on Friday night. So he wasn't concerned about their Su'udah because you could always eat 3 Su'udos on Shabbos day. So therefore, again, point I will say is even Rabbah subscribes to this concept of Kiddush and Makom Su'udah. So far, we've got Rabbah, we've got Rav Huna, and we've got Shmuel. We've got a pretty powerful lineup over here of people who subscribe to the concept of Yesh Kiddush b'Makom Su'udah. Ini, is this so? Is this so, Abosai? V'hamra Abaye said, Kol mili demar. So we'll say, is this true that Rabbah holds Yesh Kiddush b'Makom Suda in accordance with Shmuel? Yet Abaye says, Kol mili demar in general, in the Piskei Halacha of Rabbah, Hava Avid Kirav. Rabbah always paskind like Rav. Now, both remember again, what does Rav hold? Let's go back. What did Rav hold by Kiddush and Shul? What did he hold? What did he hold? Your Yotzei Kiddush and Shul, which I will say, God, again, if you hold on to these sheets clear in your head, these sugyas become much, much easier. So remember again, Rav held that halacha l'maisa, your Yotzei Kiddush and Shul. Why? You don't need Kiddush b'makom Suda. So I will say, so now we just got finished saying that Rabbah holds like Shmuel. But Abaye says, 1 second, Rabbah always holds like Rav, except for 3 cases where he held like Shmuel. What were the 3 cases where he held like Shmuel? Number 1, matirin mibeged lebeged. That I both say you could go ahead and take tzitzis that are tied onto one garment and retie them onto another garment. Okay, madlikim miner lener. That for ner Chanukah you could kindle one ner from another ner. In other words, I will say you don't need to use like an intermediary candle, like a shamas candle. Instead, you can go ahead and kindle one ner Chanukah from another ner Chanukah. And lastly, v'halacha Reb Shimon bigreira, and the halacha follows Reb Shimon in terms of dragging a bench. What does Reb Shimon hold? The sign Reb Shimon Omer gorer adam mita kisei v'safsal b'Shabbos. A person is permitted to drag a bed, a chair, a bench across a dirt area on Shabbos, obilvad shelo yiskavin la'asos charetz, as long as a person does not intend to make a furrow. Rabbi say again, this is the shita of Rav Shimon by a davar she'ino miskavein. That halacha l'maaseh Reb Shimon holds that if you do something that may result in a halacha, in a malacha, that may result in a malacha, but it's not your intention to do the malacha, that is called a davar she'ino miskavein, an unintended circumstance or an unintended repercussion, and you're not chayav for that on Shabbos. So we'll say, so again, we're not getting into these three cases, although they're quite fascinating, but Abai is asking a kasha. We just quoted Rabbah as agreeing with Shmuel, that yesh kiddush b'makom suda. Yet Abaye says, I have a klal regarding my Rebbe Rabbah. And my Rebbe Rabbah always agrees with Rav, except for three cases where he goes like Shmuel. In the case of Shmuel are tzitzis, Chanukah, davar she'ino miskavein, which would seem to indicate that Abaye should hold, that Rabbah should hold like Rav, that what? You don't need Kiddush b'makom suda. Yet Rabbah said, you do need Kiddush b'makom suda. What's going on over here? To which the Gemara said very simple. Ki chumri derav have avid, ki kulei derav lo have avid. When we say that Rabbah conducted himself like Rav, he conducted himself like the chumras of Rav, not like the kulos of Rav. So he only conducted himself again like the stringencies of Rav, not like the leniencies. And I will say, of course, over here, Rav not requiring Kiddush b'makom suda is a leniency, is a kula, and therefore again, Rabbah does not subscribe to this. Therefore, I will say, what we have over here is as follows. Our fundamental machlokes between Rav and Shmuel about Kiddush b'makom suda. Shmuel telling me that I require Kiddush b'makom suda. Rav telling me I don't require Kiddush b'makom suda. Again, nafkamina is brought down in the Gemara at nafkamina number 1. Kiddush in shul on Friday night. According to Rav, you're Yotzei Kiddush. According to Shmuel, not Yotzei Kiddush. And it appears, based on this sugya, everyone is lining up on the side of Shmuel. We've got Rabbah, we've got Abaye, all lining up on the side of Shmuel. Good. So we'll say, the Gemara goes weiter. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Af Yidei Yayin Nam Yatzah. So we'll say now a third shita. Now we'll say, now remember again, the common denominator between Rav and Shmuel. Remember, let's go back for just a moment to the Kiddush and Shul case. The common denominator, what do Rav and Shmuel both agree on? What do they both agree? That Yidei Yayin lo Yatzah. Right? They both agree that when you go home and you want to drink more wine, that halacha l'maaseh you have to make another bracha. Now we'll say, why do you have to make another bracha? Hesach hadas. Good. Because everyone is agreeing that a change of location, by definition, creates a lapse of bracha awareness. And whenever there is a lapse of bracha awareness, that triggers the need for a brand new bracha. We'll say, now watch this. Comes along Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, not when you make Kiddush in Shul, not only are you Yotzei Kiddush, but you are also Yotzei Yidei Yayin. Wow. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, we'll say, watch this. It's kedai to come to Shul, right? You make Kiddush in Shul Friday night. Not only are you Yotzei Kiddush, but what? When you go home and you want to drink another glass of wine, Gei Gizun Tahait, you're permitted to. No new bracha. Look at Rashbam for just a moment. Rabbi Yochanan Afi de Yayin Am Yatzu Shein Tzarich Lachzor Levarich Al Yayin Shebesoch Hasuda Shahari Lo Hisiach Daito B'Yitziaso Beis HaKnesses Shadayin Daito Le'echov V'Lishtoso Beis. Well, it's incredible. Rabbi Yochanan says there's no Hesach Hadas. Because also when I leave shul, I got a one-track mind. What's my one-track mind when I leave shul? Right? Wine. Okay. All right. Suda, we'll call it. Right? Suda, if it's wine, that see me after shir. Right? And I'll say, but again, right? Wine. I'm having Suda. I mean, there's no Hesach Hadas. It's clear. When you go home for Shabbat, say again, I'm going home to eat my Suda. There's no Hesach Hadas in that. If Rabbi Yochanan holds it, Allah Chalamaysa, when you get home, not only do you not have to make Kiddush, but again, your bracha on wine is covered as well. So the Gemara says, I will say, we're going to see over here. So remember, this is not a din in Shabbos. This is a din in Hilchos Brachas. Right? So Rabbi Yochanan is coming along and he's introducing to us as this idea that maybe a change of location. You see, we assumed, both Rav and Shmuel agreed that a change of location by definition represents a Hesach Hadas for brachas purposes, which triggers then the need for a new bracha. Rabbi Yochanan says, not necessarily. Now watch this. Rabbi Yochanan Tameh. Dam Rav Chanan bar Abaye, Amar Pedas, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Echad Shinui Yayin, Ve'echad, Amar Beis, Shinui Makom, Ein Tzarech Levarich. Rabbi Yochanan holds that halacha l'maisa, whether you have a shinui yain, I will say, now this is actually very interesting. Rabbi Yochanan says like this, let's say you're drinking wine over the course of the meal, and now they bring out a new barrel. Forget about bottles. We're talking about barrels. Right? So let's say you're in the middle of a meal, and they go ahead and they bring out a new barrel. New barrel of wine, different kind of wine. Rabbi Yochanan says there is no need to make a new bracha. Now, I'll say, take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment on Amud Aleph. The Rashbam says, Echad shinui yayin, sheheviya lo yayin lechaves acheres. Let's say during the course of the meal, they brought out another barrel, another type of wine. V'yesh lo tam meshunah, and it has a different taste. O garua, o meshubach, whether it's worse or it's better than the first wine, ein tzarech levarich shenis ala yayin. Both say you don't have to make another bracha. However, aval hatov v'hamitiv mihas mevarich im meshubach min harishon. However, Rabbi say halacha lemaisa, if the second wine is better than the first, you have to make hatov v'hamitiv. So this is actually very interesting. So Rabbi Yochanan is going to say, essentially, once you make a brei pri hagafen over the course of the meal, that brei pri hagafen covers everything and anything you're going to drink during the meal. Even if they bring you out a new barrel of wine, whether that new wine is worse or better than the first, you don't need another hagafen. However, Rabbi Yochanan will agree that if the new wine they brought out is better than the first, although you don't need another brei pri hagafen, you will make the bracha of hatov v'hametiv. Hatov v'hametiv. So again, this happens in an interesting halacha that comes up very often, because this is true even practically speaking. Once you make hagafen covers all of the wine you're going to drink during your suda. However, if you bring out better wine that was not on the table at the time you made your hagafen, you will make the bracha of hatov hametiv. So this is a very common situation. If you make, let's say you make kiddush on white wine, and then over the course of the meal, you bring out red wine, and that red wine was not on your table at the time of kiddush, halacha l'maisa, you don't have to make another hagafen, because the hagafen of kiddush covers all of your wine over the suda, but you will make another bracha of hatov hametiv on that red wine. Hatov HaMeitiv only goes from white to red, not from red to white. Okay, in any event, not our topic. I will say, but Rabbi Yochanan holds that halacha l'mais, you don't make another bracha on shinui yayin or shinui makum. So here you see quite explicitly, right? Ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan holds that halacha l'maisa, if you change location over the course of a meal, you don't have to make another bracha on wine in your new location. Take a look at the Rashbam. Rashbam says, I'm in base now. Echad shinei makom, l'chol davran ne'achalim, achar mena b'makom zeh, chozer va'ochel makom acher, ein tzarech levarich shniya, ukigon lo hayo lo hesech hadas bein sayim. So we'll say, by the way, this is not a din in wine. Rabbi Yochanan holds in general, whenever you're eating, if you started eating in location A, and you move to location B, you don't have to make a new bracha, as long as what? As long as you did not have a lapse of awareness. You both said this is actually very interesting. According to Rav and Shmuel essentially hold that wherever there is a change of location, there is an inherent hesach hadas. And Rabbi Yochanan says, who says hesach hadas is a function of my awareness. If I didn't have a lapse of awareness, I didn't have a lapse of awareness. So again, I leave shul. It's clear to me from shul. My stomach's grumbling. I know I want my suda. There's no hesach hadas between my shul and the house. Therefore, Allah l'maisa, I'm yotzi the hagafen in shul, and that covers my drinking into the house as well. So we'll say this is the position of Rabbi Yochanan, that shinui makom does not require a new bracha, and therefore, again, plugging this back in, therefore, as opposed to Rav and Shmuel, who disagree on whether or not you're yotze kiddush in shul, but agree that you're not yotze yidei yayin, you have to go make another bracha on wine. Rabbi Yochanan will say, not only are you yotze kiddush with the kiddush in shul, but you're even what? You're even yotze yidei yayin as well. Quite dramatic. So meisvei. So the Gemara is the kasha shinoi makom tzarich levarech, shinoi yayin tzarich levarech. That where there is a shinoi makom, right, where you change location, you must make another bracha. But a shinoi yayin, if you change wine over the course of the meal, you don't need to make another bracha. To Yufta de Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi say this refutes the position of Rabbi Yochanan to Yufta. Indeed, it is a refutation. So Rabbi say Rabbi Yochanan's position is refuted, and shinoi makom, changing location, does represent a halachic hesech hadas, lapse of awareness, and would trigger the need for another bracha. Now, I will say how this plays out in Hilchos Brachos, we're going to still see. It takes on different types. It manifests itself in different ways, in different bracha situations. So let's see some examples. Yosef Rav Idi bar Avin kameid Rav Chisda. Listen to this case. So Rav Idi bar Avin was sitting before Rav Chisda. The Yosef Rav Chisda v'kar mishel Rav Huna. Rav Chisda was sitting and telling over halacha din Rav Huna. What was the halacha? Had the amrit shinui makom tzarich levarich. When we speak about the idea that a change in location triggers the need for a new bracha, because we'll say, remember again, which is another way of saying, wherever there is shinui makom, what's the mechanics? Wherever there's shinui makom, there's what? There's what? Hesech hadas, a lapse of awareness, and therefore again a requirement for a new bracha. So when we said, had the amrit shinui makom tzarich levarich, listen to this. Lo shanu ela mibayis lebayis. That's only true when there's what's called a dramatic change of location. I guess both say what we would call better way to say it is there's a change of address. There's a change of address. Mibayis lebayis. However, aval mimakom lemakom lo. But I will say ultimately again from one place to another within the same. I will say it's interesting in Hagos V'Tziyunim he writes it as lo shalom bayis lebayis aval mipina lepina, from one corner to another corner. Ultimately not like that. And I will say, Rashbam seems to indicate, and Rashi also indicates, Rashi is mimakom lamakom, there's Rashi now, mibayis la'aliyah. So I will say, so this is actually very interesting. So you have Rav Chisda saying in the name of Rav Huna, when we say that shinui makom requires a new bracha, shinui makom in this context really refers to an actual change of address. One home to another home. But within the same home, even mibayis la'aliyah, from the rooftop terrace to the basement, that's not called shinui makom. Now, what I want to point out to you something very interesting, which is now you begin to see a distinction between what? Potentially between shinui makom for bracha purposes versus what? Kiddush b'makom suda. Because also remember again, we floated the idea in Amud Aleph that maybe going from your rooftop terrace to your basement, maybe that would require a new kiddush in the basement or in the dining room for that matter. But it's interesting. Well, again, we'll get back to that. But again, we clearly see from Rav Huna that Allah Lamaisa for bracha purposes, shinui makom, which represents a hesach hadas, which would then trigger the obligation for a new bracha, is only change of address, mibayis lebayis, but movement within the same home, even dramatic movement from the rooftop terrace to the basement. That's not called shinui makom. That's called still the same makom, the same place, and wouldn't require a new bracha. Amar Rav Idi bar Avin, hachi tanena le b'masnisin, debei Rav Hinik, va'amar le b'masnisa, debei bar Hinik kabasech. So we'll say Rav Idi bar Avin said to Rav Huna, okay, by the way, that which you just told us was explicitly taught in a brisa. The other Rav Huna, Masnisa kamashmalos. I don't say there's Rav Huna. So then why is Rav Huna saying it? If it's explicitly taught in a brisa that shinui makom is dafka, change of address, but within the same home, even from the rooftop terrace to the basement, that's not called shinui makom. So why is Rav Huna just restating an obvious brisa? To which the Gemara says, Rav Huna masnisa lo shmialei. Okay, Rav Huna didn't know the brisa, so Rav Huna is not coming to restate a brisa. He did not know it. Good. Visu, furthermore, again, we'll say, so again, we're continuing this discussion, Visu. So we'll say, so now I have Rav Huna, so we'll say this is a very important qualification. So Rav Huna's position is, shinui makom, again, only an actual change of address, what we call mibayis lebayis, but ultimately, again, a change of location within the same address, within the same home, that's not called shinui makom. Visu, more to come, Visu. Yosef Rav Chisda v'kamar mishmei dinafshei. Furthermore, Rav Chisda said the following: Had the amrit shinui makom sarach levarech. When we say that a change in location triggers a hesach hadas, which by definition necessitates a new bracha. Listen to this. This is very exciting. Lo amr ela b'dvarim she'in tu'unin bracha lacharein bimkoman. This only refers to food items which do not require a bracha achrona in their original location. Avol, dvarim hatu'unin bracha lacharein bimkoman ein sarich levarich. But I will say now, watch this. But however, food items which require a bracha achrona to be said in their original location, that type of eating does not trigger the obligation for a new bracha, even in a second location. Now, Bosai, let's talk about this in just a moment. Take a look at Rashbam for just a moment. So, Bosai comes. So let's talk about this outside attributes. So, Rav Chisda says we're agreeing with the concept that shinui makom triggers hesach hadas, which ultimately then triggers the obligation for a new bracha. Rav Chisda is qualifying this, and he says, when is that true? Only when you're eating the type of food that does not require a bracha achrona to be recited in the original location. But if you're eating a food which required a bracha achrona in its original location, eating in the second location will not require a new bracha. Now, why is that? So let's take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. First of all, he says, well, actually, let's do this outside just because of time. So we'll say the distinction he's making is, let's say, water and water. So let's say water, you make a shackle, and only afterwards requires a brain of fashos. Where can you make your brain of fashos? Where can you make a brain of fashos? Anywhere you want. As opposed to, let's say, benching, or bracha achos mein shalosh. So ideally, right, benching, or ultimately, let's say, alamichya, should be recited in the place where you ate. So what Rav Chisda is now introducing is as follows. He says, if I began to, let's say, eat my meal, or eat bread in location A, and then I move to location B, I don't require a new hamotzi. Now, both say, now why not? Go back to Rashbam for just a moment. Why not? Because my taima, lekiva kama hadar. Now, both say, lekiva kama hadar literally means because I'm going to return to the original established place. Now, what does that mean? Look at the Rashbam. Lekiva kama hadar kilomar aldas suuda rishona hu ochel achshav l'sayim suudaso. Now, both say, now when you read this phrase, what it sounds like Rav Chisda is saying is, since ideally I have to bench in location A, I'm tethered to location A, and everything that happens, even in location B, is tethered back to location A. Then I both say, now according to Rav Chisda, lav dafka that I'm coming back to location A. But since ultimately, again, my act of eating is tethered to a particular geographic location, anything that happens over the course of that meal, even in a subsequent location, is considered tethered to the original location, and therefore there's no hesach hadas. We'll say, to say this a little bit simpler, Rav Chisda says like this, essentially, where your act of eating tethers you to an original location, even if you switch locations over the course of the meal, everything is considered to be an extension of your original location. There's no hesach hadas, and therefore no obligation for a new bracha. That's Rav Chisda's shita. Which I will say again, I want to be clear, I may never come back to location A. Right? I just want to be clear, but because the act of eating that I've done has triggered the obligation for a bracha achrona, which is tethered to a particular location, even if I subsequently change locations over the course of the meal, everything I do is considered to be an extension of the original location. That's the shita of Rav Chisda. Rav Sheshes says no. I disagree. Rav Sheshes says no. That doesn't make sense. Once you change locations, doesn't matter what you're eating. Whether you are technically tethered to location A, not tethered to location A, who cares? At the end of the day, we look at where you are, and if you've changed location, by definition, change of location triggers the obligation for a new bracha. So we'll say, let's analyze this. Meisvei, here we go. We'll say, we'll just do this one line. B'nei chabura shay misubin lishtos. Let's listen to this. Let's say you have a chabura. Group of people. All of us are sitting together. Now we'll say, so delicious. We sat down to drink wine together. We sat down to have a suda together. V'alku raglein. Let's say it's likras chasana, likras kala. And then what happens? We see a chasana procession passing by. So we all get up, leave the room to go ahead and say mazel to the chasana and kala. So we've left the place that we're eating. Kishen yotzim. So we'll say, when we leave, we don't have to go ahead and bench before we leave. And for the moment when we come back and you want to continue eating, we don't have to make another bracha. We'll say, even though what's happened over here? What's happened? We left the location. But when is that so? That you don't have to bench before you leave. And you don't have to make a new bracha when you come back? When you left someone behind. Now, both say, it doesn't have to be a zakin or chola. The reason the Gemara used the example of zakin or chola is why? Because just bepashas, that's the guy who's not coming. So as long as you left someone from the chabura behind, that person left behind is the person who anchors the group in its place. But if you don't leave anyone, if the entire chabura leaves, then what? Tu'unin bracha l'mafreya kishen chosrin. I'm sorry. Tu'unin bracha kishen yotzin tu'unin bracha l'mafreya. You really should bench before you leave. And kishen chosrin tu'unin bracha l'chatila. And ultimately, again, when you come back, you have to make a new bracha. Mediktani akru ragleim michlal de bidvar. So we'll say. So again. So what do you see from this? You see from this over here that halacha l'maisa. The only way to prevent a new bracha. Or the only way to prevent, let's see. The fact that it says that the group literally uprooted their feet, so Shabo said that lashon of akru ragleihem means that you were eating something. Ultimately, again, Rabbi said, we're going to stop over here. We're going to pick up with this case in Meretz Hashem tomorrow. So Rabbi said, so just understand what we're leaving off with over here. We're leaving off now with a discussion. Here's what we know. We know that, well, at least we think we know, that shinui makum triggers an obligation for new bracha. The shaila is under what circumstances. We have just clearly seen a case where a chevra is eating, they're leaving the place where they're eating, and they're coming back. And yet the brisa does not necessitate benching before you leave, and a new bracha for when you come back. The circumstances of that, the Meretz Hashem, we'll see tomorrow's shir. Shkach Rabosai.